Most people will never become successful. That is not a cruel thing to say. It is the truth, and I have spent more than 20 years proving it. I sat with Andrew Carnegie in his private study while he explained the philosophy that turned a penniless Scottish immigrant into the wealthiest man in America. I studied Henry Ford, a man with almost no formal education, who revolutionized an entire industry and built one of the greatest fortunes the modern world has ever seen. I observed Thomas Edison working through failure after failure after failure until he literally lit up the world. After more than 20,000 hours of research, after interviewing over 500 of the most accomplished individuals this country has ever produced, I arrived at a conclusion that changed my understanding of everything. Success is not random. It is not reserved for the gifted or the fortunate. Success is the predictable, inevitable result of certain habits practiced with patience and consistency. And the most painful part of this discovery, the part that has haunted me ever since, is that these habits are simple. So simple that a child could understand them. So simple that anyone could begin practicing them tomorrow morning. But almost no one does. And that is why most people live their entire lives wondering what went wrong. Tonight, I want to hand you 5 of these habits, not as theory, not as pleasant ideas that fade by morning. I want to give them to you as real practical tools that you can use for the rest of your life. And I need to tell you something before we begin. The 5th habit, the final one I will share, is the one I have seen separate truly extraordinary people from everyone else more decisively than any other principle in all my years of study. It is the habit most people never develop, and its absence explains more failure than any lack of talent, education, or opportunity ever could. So stay with me through every word of what follows, because what comes at the end may be the most valuable thing you hear this year. Let me start with a question, and I want you to answer it honestly right now inside your own mind. If someone stopped you on the street tonight and asked, "What exactly do you want out of your life?" could you answer them? Not with something vague, not with "I want to be happy," or "I want to be comfortable," or "I just want to stop worrying about money." Could you give them a specific number, a specific date, a clear, detailed picture of exactly what you are building and exactly when you intend to have it? I have asked this question to thousands of men and women over the course of my career. Thousands. And the answer is almost always the same. Hesitation, a long pause, then something vague wrapped up to sound like a real answer. I want to be wealthy. I want freedom. I want a better life for my family. And every time I hear it, I know I am looking at someone who will struggle for years and never fully understand why. Because the first great truth I uncovered in all my research is this: a vague desire has no power, none whatsoever. It cannot direct your mind. It cannot organize your actions. It cannot attract opportunities. It sits in your head like fog, shapeless and useless, while life passes you by. This brings me to the first habit, and it is the one upon which everything else is built. Define exactly what you want, write it down in specific terms with a clear deadline, and review that written statement every morning when you wake and every night before you sleep. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I have heard this before. I know about goal setting, and you may be right. You may have heard it 100 times. But I want to challenge you directly. Have you done it? Not considered doing it? Not agreed with the idea? Have you taken a physical piece of paper right now in your real life and written down a specific goal with a specific number and a specific date? And did you read it aloud to yourself this morning? And will you read it again before you go to sleep tonight? Because I discovered something in my years of research that most people miss entirely. There is a canyon, a vast and dangerous canyon, between understanding a principle and practicing it. And most people spend their entire lives standing on the wrong side of that canyon, convinced that understanding is enough. It is not. Knowledge without action is as useless as a ship without a rudder. Let me explain why this habit carries such extraordinary power. The human mind operates on 2 levels. There is the conscious mind, which handles your everyday thinking and reasoning. It is the mind you are using right now to follow my words. But beneath it, there is another mind, far more powerful. I call it the subconscious mind. It never sleeps. It never stops working. It is constantly processing, constantly searching, constantly trying to move you toward whatever target you have given it. But here is the key. It needs clear instructions. When you write down a definite purpose, when you attach a specific deadline, and when you repeat it to yourself with feeling and conviction twice a day, you are programming your subconscious mind with a target as precise as the coordinates a ship's captain enters into a compass. And once that target is set, your subconscious mind begins reorganizing your entire life around it. You start seeing opportunities you walked past every day without noticing. You begin making small decisions differently, decisions that align with your purpose without you even trying. Your conversations change. Your priorities change. The way you spend your time begins to shift almost on its own. I learned this principle directly from Andrew Carnegie. He told me something I have carried with me ever since. He said that every great achievement, every great fortune, every great life begins with one thing and one thing only, a clear, definite picture held firmly in the mind. Not talent, not luck, not connections, a definite picture. Because without that picture, even the hardest worker in the world is like a man running in the dark. He may be moving fast, but he has no idea where he is going. Think about it this way. Imagine two ships leaving the same harbor on the same morning. The first ship has a captain, a compass, a map, and a clear destination. The captain knows exactly which port he is sailing toward and exactly when he intends to arrive. The second ship has no captain, no compass, and no destination. It simply drifts wherever the wind and current happen to carry it. Where does the first ship arrive? Exactly where it planned. Where does the second ship end up? On the rocks, lost at sea, or wandering in circles until it runs out of fuel. 98 out of every 100 people I studied were living like that second ship, drifting, hoping, waiting for some outside force to carry them somewhere good. But life does not work that way. Left to itself, the current of life does not deliver you to success. It delivers you to the shores of mediocrity, and it does so slowly enough that you barely notice it happening. So the habit is this. Write your goal down tonight. Make it specific. Give it a deadline, and then read it every morning and every night for the rest of your life, or until you achieve it and replace it with a larger one. But defining your purpose is only the foundation. It is only the beginning. Because I discovered that even men with burning clarity about their goals still failed when they lacked the second habit. And this one, I must warn you, is where most people begin to lose the battle without ever realizing a battle was taking place. What I observed next changed my understanding of why some people achieve and others merely dream. The second habit is doing the most important and most difficult task first, every single day, before anything else has a chance to steal your attention. Let me tell you what I saw when I studied the daily routines of the most successful men in America. I did not just study their philosophies. I studied how they spent their hours. I watched how they made decisions, how they organized their mornings, and how they protected their energy. And a pattern appeared that I could not ignore. The men who built the greatest fortunes and accomplished the most remarkable things did not begin their day with trivial tasks. They did not start by sorting through minor correspondence. They did not waste their freshest hours on small errands or comfortable routines. They sat down each morning and identified the single most important task that would move them closer to their definite purpose. And they did that task first, before anything else, before the world had an opportunity to impose its distractions upon them. The average person does the opposite, and I say this not to criticize, but to illuminate a pattern I have observed in thousands of lives. Most people begin their morning with whatever feels easy. They handle small matters. They organize things that do not need organizing. They create an elaborate illusion of productivity, while the one thing that actually matters, the one decision, the one phone call, the one piece of work that would genuinely move their life forward, sits untouched. And when afternoon arrives and their energy is spent and their mind is foggy, they look at that important task and say, tomorrow. I want you to think about how many lives have been consumed by that single word, tomorrow. I have watched men with extraordinary potential, men with every advantage, waste 10, 20, even 30 years on the promise of tomorrow, and it never came. Tomorrow is not a plan. It is a graveyard where ambition goes to die quietly. But there is something deeper happening when you build this habit, something beyond simple time management. Every time you face a difficult task first thing in the morning and do it anyway, even when you do not feel ready, Even when every fiber of you wants to do something easier, you are building a quality that I consider more valuable than any amount of money. That quality is self-discipline. And self-discipline is the master key. The man who possesses it does not need to wait for the right mood. He does not need perfect conditions. He does not need someone to hold him accountable. He holds himself accountable. He acts because the action is necessary, and in acting, he generates the motivation that others spend their entire lives waiting for. I want you to understand this because it reverses the way most people think. Most people believe motivation comes first and action follows. But I observed the opposite in every successful person I studied. Action came first, motivation followed. Carnegie did not wait to feel inspired before making his most important decisions. Ford did not wait for enthusiasm before walking into his factory. Edison did not wait for a burst of energy before entering his laboratory. These men acted first, and the energy, the clarity, the confidence, those things arrived after the action, not before it. Here is what I want you to do. Tomorrow morning, before you open a single message, before you attend to any small errand, ask yourself one question. What is the single most important thing I could do today to advance my definite purpose? Then do it. Guard that first hour of your morning as though your future depends on it, because in a very real sense it does. Practice this for 30 days, and I believe you will feel a change so profound it will astonish you. But I must tell you that even this habit, powerful as it is, has a vulnerability so dangerous that it has destroyed more goals, more ambitions, and more futures than any financial disaster or business failure in history. The third habit addresses this vulnerability directly, and I warn you, it may be the most difficult principle to accept because it involves the people you trust and love the most. The third habit is guarding your mind with deliberate, conscious intention against every influence that does not serve your definite purpose. I cannot emphasize this strongly enough. Of all the factors I studied, of all the reasons that talented, determined, capable men failed to achieve what they were fully capable of achieving, this one appeared more frequently than any other. And it was almost never recognized by the person it destroyed. Let me describe what I saw so many times that the memory of it still troubles me. A man would approach me burning with ambition. He had defined his purpose. He was ready to sacrifice. He had fire in his eyes and iron in his will, and then he would make a single devastating mistake. He would go home and share his dream with someone he loved, a wife, a brother, a childhood friend, and that person, meaning no harm at all, operating entirely from love and concern, would plant a tiny seed of doubt. Are you sure about this? That sounds very risky. What if you lose everything? People in our family have never done anything like that. Just a few words, just a gentle expression of worry. But I would watch that seed take root in his mind like a weed in fertile soil. Within days, the certainty he had felt began to waver. Within weeks, the fire was dimmer. Within months, the dream was abandoned entirely. And the man never knew what killed it. He thought he lost his nerve. He thought the idea was not strong enough. But the truth is, someone else's fear poisoned his faith before it had the chance to bear fruit. I came to understand this principle as one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. The people closest to you shape your thinking more profoundly than you realize. More than books, more than education, more than personal experience, because their influence is not just intellectual, it is emotional, it is constant. It slips past your defenses because it comes wrapped in love and familiarity. A stranger telling you something negative you can dismiss, but your mother, your best friend, your spouse telling you the same thing that lands differently. That sinks in. That changes what you believe is possible. This is why I developed what I call the mastermind principle. The idea at its heart is this: you must deliberately choose who influences your thinking. You must surround yourself with people whose minds, attitudes, and ambitions raise your own. And you must create distance, emotional distance, if not physical distance, from people whose fear, doubt, and negativity pull you down, even when those people love you, especially when those people love you, because the most dangerous enemy of your dream is not the stranger who criticizes you. It is the friend who worries for you. Think of your mind as a garden. You are the only gardener. If you allow anyone who passes by to throw their seeds into your soil, weeds will overtake every flower you try to grow. It will not matter how good your seeds are. It will not matter how diligently you water them. If the weeds are allowed to spread, nothing of value survives. Your mind works exactly the same way. Every conversation you participate in, every opinion you absorb, every piece of negativity you tolerate is either nourishing your purpose or poisoning it. There is no neutral ground. I made it a lifelong habit to spend as much time as possible in the company of people who had already achieved what I was working toward, not to impress them, not to ask for favors, but because their way of thinking was contagious. When you sit across the table from a man who has built a fortune from nothing, a man who has weathered crises that would have destroyed most people, something shifts inside you. His certainty becomes available to you. His standards become your standards. His way of seeing the world begins to reshape your own. This is not wishful thinking. This is one of the most reliable principles I have ever observed. Guard your mind, choose your influences, and never, ever underestimate the power of the people you allow into your daily thinking. But now I must move to the fourth habit, and this one requires a different kind of discipline. It requires patience, real patience, the kind that most people say they have but reveal through their behavior that they lack entirely. And what I am about to tell you about money may seem unremarkable at first, but I promise you, once you truly understand it, you will never think about wealth the same way again. The fourth habit is spending less than you earn and commanding the difference to work on your behalf. I know. This does not sound like a grand revelation. It does not carry the drama of a bold business venture or the excitement of a visionary idea. But let me tell you what I discovered during decades of studying both the wealthy and the poor, and why this principle belongs alongside every other habit we have discussed tonight. I encountered two types of men throughout my research. The first type earned impressive incomes, sometimes extraordinary incomes, but they were always broke. Every time their earnings increased, their spending increased to match it and then exceeded it. A raise meant a bigger house. A bonus meant a more expensive automobile. A windfall meant a lavish trip. They were trapped on a wheel of their own making, running faster and faster, never gaining a single inch of financial ground. And they always had reasons. The house was an investment. The car was necessary. The trip was deserved. The reasons never stopped, and neither did the spending. The second type of person I studied earned far less. Modest wages, ordinary jobs, nothing anyone would look at and call impressive. But these men had a habit the first group lacked. Before they paid a single bill, before they bought a single luxury, before they spent $1 on anything, they set aside a fixed portion of their income and invested it. 10% as a rule. Sometimes more when times were good, sometimes slightly less when times were hard, but always something, every single month without exception. And here is what happened. Over 5 years, the difference between these two groups was noticeable. Over 10 years, it was significant. Over 20 years, it was staggering. The modest earner who saved and invested consistently had built real wealth, wealth that produced its own income, wealth that grew while he slept, wealth that could sustain him and his family regardless of whether he ever earned another paycheck. The high earner who spent everything had nothing. Nothing except stress, debt, and the terrifying realization that if his income stopped tomorrow, his life would collapse within months. I want to explain why compounding is so powerful, because most people hear the word and do not truly grasp what it means. Imagine planting a single tree. In the first year, it is small. You can barely see it growing. In the second year, it is slightly taller, but nothing impressive. You might wonder if the effort is even worth it, but you keep watering it. You keep tending it. And in the 5th year, something changes. Branches appear. In the 10th year, those branches are thick, and each one is bearing fruit. And each piece of fruit contains seeds that will grow into new trees. By the 20th year, you do not have a tree. You have an orchard. That is compound growth. That is what happens when you save a portion of everything you earn and invest it wisely over time. But it only works if you start, and it only works if you do not stop. The men who built the greatest self-made fortunes in America all shared this habit. They paid themselves first. They treated saving not as an afterthought, not as something done with whatever happened to be left over at the end of the month, but as the first and most sacred obligation of their financial life. I urge you to begin tonight. Whatever you earn, set aside 10% before anything else. Live on the rest. It will feel tight for a few weeks, but your mind is wonderfully adaptable, and soon you will not even notice the difference in your daily spending, but you will notice the difference growing quietly in your account, working for you every day, every night, every hour. But I must be honest with you now about something. Even a man with a clear goal, iron discipline, a protected mind, and wise financial habits will face moments when it all seems to be falling apart. Moments when the plan is failing, moments when the investments are shrinking, moments when the people he distanced himself from seem to have been right all along. And in those moments, there is only one thing that will determine whether he becomes one of the rare few who achieve their dreams or joins the vast majority who surrender just before the sunrise. That brings me to the fifth and final habit. I saved it for last because in all my years of study, across all my research, through every case and every life I examined, I found that this single quality explains more success and more failure than everything else combined. The fifth habit is persistence, not the shallow, comfortable kind, not the kind where you try something for a few months and then walk away when it gets hard. I mean an absolute, bone-deep, unshakable refusal to accept permanent defeat. Let me tell you what I found when I looked closely at the lives of the men and women who achieved what the world calls extraordinary. They were not the most talented. I encountered many men of average ability who accomplished far more than brilliant men who lacked this one quality. They were not the best educated. Henry Ford had almost no formal schooling. Andrew Carnegie started as a bobbin boy in a cotton factory. They were not the most fortunate. Many of them started with nothing, knew no one of influence, and faced obstacles that would make most people quit before the first year was over. What they had, and it burned in every one of them like a furnace that could not be extinguished, was the absolute inability to quit. Quitting was simply not available to them. It was not a decision they could make. Something inside them, some combination of burning desire, faith, and stubborn will, made surrender impossible. Thomas Edison is the example I return to most often because his life illustrates this principle with perfect clarity. He attempted more than 10,000 experiments before he produced a working electric light. 10,000. Can you imagine the pressure he must have faced? The ridicule? The doubt from everyone around him? After 1,000 failures, most men would have stopped. After 5,000, any reasonable person would have concluded it was impossible. But Edison was not reasonable about his purpose. He was relentless. And when someone asked him how it felt to fail so many times, he gave an answer that reveals everything you need to know about persistence. He said he had not failed at all. He had successfully discovered 10,000 ways that did not work. Each failure was not a defeat. It was education. It was progress. It was one step closer to the answer. That is the mindset I am asking you to adopt. Not blind stubbornness that repeats the same mistake. Persistence with intelligence. Persistence that holds the goals sacred while treating every method as expendable. When one plan fails, create another. When that plan fails, create a third. The destination never changes, only the route. Here is why persistence carries such practical power. When you refuse to quit, you give yourself the one thing that no amount of talent or money can buy: time. Time to learn what you could not have known at the beginning. Time to develop skills through real experience that no classroom and no book could ever teach you. Time for your reputation to build. Time for the right people to notice you. Time for circumstances to shift in your favor, as they inevitably do for the person who stays in the game long enough. I have seen men work toward a goal for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, meeting failure at every turn, and then suddenly, as if some invisible barrier finally broke, everything came together. The business that struggled for a decade became profitable overnight. The manuscript rejected by 30 publishers became a bestseller with the 31st. And people who had paid no attention during those long years of effort suddenly called the man lucky. An overnight success, they said. But I knew the truth. I knew about the years of persistence that no one saw. The mornings he woke up and kept working when nothing was working. The evenings he revised his plans instead of abandoning them. The quiet, invisible stubbornness that carried him through seasons when there was no evidence at all that success was coming. Now I want to show you how these 5 habits form a single system, because this may be the most important thing I can leave you with tonight. These habits do not operate independently. They are not 5 separate tools sitting in a toolbox. They are 5 parts of one machine. And when all 5 parts are working together, they produce a force that I have watched overcome obstacles that seemed absolutely impossible. Your definite purpose gives your persistence a direction. Without a clear goal, persistence is just aimless wandering. You are working hard, but you are going nowhere. Doing the most important thing first builds the daily self-discipline that persistence demands. Without that discipline, persistence crumbles the moment the work becomes uncomfortable. Guarding your mind protects the faith that keeps persistence alive. Without that protection, the fears and doubts of others will erode your determination long before you reach the finish line. And managing your money wisely gives you the financial foundation to keep going when others are forced to stop, because persistence is useless if you cannot afford to continue. Each habit strengthens the others. Each one makes the whole system more powerful. And together, they create a kind of momentum that builds slowly at first and then becomes almost impossible to stop. I want to leave you with a final picture. 2 people stand at the same starting point tonight. Same age, same income, same background, same potential. The first person will hear these habits and do nothing. They will agree with the ideas, perhaps even admire them, and then return to the same patterns that have produced the same results for years. They will drift without a purpose. They will start each day with the easiest task. They will absorb the doubts of everyone around them. They will spend every dollar they earn. And when difficulty comes, they will take it as proof that success was not meant for them. 5 years from now, they will be in the same place, perhaps worse, wondering what went wrong. The second person will act. Tonight, they will take a piece of paper and write down a definite purpose with a specific deadline. Tomorrow morning, they will identify the most important task of the day and complete it before anything else. This week, they will begin paying attention to who influences their thinking and start seeking the company of people who are building, growing, and achieving. From their very next paycheck, they will set aside 10% before spending a single dollar. And when the first setback comes, as it always does, they will not interpret it as a sign to stop. They will adjust their plan and keep moving. 10 years from now, the distance between these 2 people will be so vast that you would never guess they started in the same place. And there will be no mystery about why. I have given my life to the study of success. I have sat with men who built empires from nothing and men who lost everything they had. I have examined thousands of cases and searched for the pattern behind achievement and the pattern behind failure. And I can tell you tonight, as plainly and as honestly as I know how, that the difference comes down to habits. Not talent, not luck, not circumstance, habits. The 5 I have shared with you tonight are the ones I consider most essential, most powerful, and most universally applicable. Define what you want with absolute clarity and hold that vision in your mind every single day. Do the hardest, most important work first while your strength is greatest. Guard your mind against every influence that would weaken your faith in your own purpose. Save a portion of everything you earn and invest it with patience and discipline. And persist. Persist when the plan is not working. Persist when the people around you say it is hopeless. Persist when every voice inside you whispers that it would be easier to stop, because I have learned this one truth above all others. The men and women who refuse to quit are the ones who eventually win. It is not a question of whether. It is only a question of when. The choice before you tonight is not whether these principles work. They work. They have always worked. They will continue to work long after you and I are gone. The only question is whether you will work them, whether you will take them from this conversation and weave them into the fabric of your daily life, whether you will become the person who writes the goal, does the hard thing, guards the mind, saves the money, and never stops. That choice is not made once in a moment of inspiration. It is made tomorrow morning, and the morning after that, and every morning for the rest of your life. Make it. and your life will become something you once thought was only possible for other people. If this lesson helped you, subscribe to Napoleon Mindset for more timeless principles of success and wealth.